Okay. Welcome everybody to this amazing event called Take a Stand. This is an event where I am interviewing 35 incredible women who all each have a story of triumph over trauma. You'll have to excuse if there's a bit of background noise. We're having a problem with StreamYard. We're not sure what's going on, but it's out of our control, so hopefully it's not going to be too disturbing for you. Now, as you listen to the conversation between me and Lisa today, I just want you to be mindful that the conversation that we have is personal. It can be challenging. The stories can be challenging to hear. So I just want to make sure that you reach out and you get the support it is that you need. Friends and family members. If that's not possible, reach out to your doctor. If you feel that you need immediate emotional support, head on down to your local hospital and wait in A&E and just wait to speak to somebody. But make sure you get the support it is that you need. If you're listening to the conversation and Lisa says something and it really piques your interest and you're interested in learning more, please do just reach out to Lisa. Her details will be below the video. So you can contact with her direct, which would be absolutely awesome. And just to welcome people back on the YouTube channel, thank you for coming back and listening to the stories. This is a channel that is all about living life trauma-free. If that topic interests you, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell, give the video a thumbs up. And if you've got a question for myself or Lisa, just pop it below the box and we'll do our best to come back and answer the question for you. So welcome, Lisa, soon to be author.
I know, exciting, isn't it? It's crazy. I can't believe I've finally actually done something like that. It's something we often speak about, isn't it? I think if you've always fancied writing a book, you've spoke about it since you were a kid, really, haven't you? Always like, oh, I'm going to write a book, and you always think you're going to do it and never do. But I thank you. I mean, we've been social friends for a long time, but thank you for the opportunity, and yeah, it's been really exciting.
Well, it's powerful. It comes out on the 16th of this month, and it's on pre-order at the moment, so if you want to pick it up, I think if Lisa's story really resonates you, pick up a copy on the book on pre-order, because Lisa goes into a lot more detail about her story and how the pieces of the puzzle fit together and the compound effects of what it is that you've experienced, and it's laid out nicely. Not only is it laid out nicely, but you've also given an exercise and a way forward to help people out of the challenges it is that they are experiencing. So it's called Transmute Trauma, Discover Who You Truly Are. And you can search under Lisa's author name, Lisa Kelly. And what you will do is you will find her author page. And on her author page, Amazon author page, you'll find the book. Or you can go to Lisa direct and you can get a signed copy of the book from Lisa, which I think would be absolutely awesome.
I know. Okay. We've got a live launch for that too. That'll be exciting.
I know. I can't wait. I've just got goosebumps. Lisa, let's dig into your story a little bit. Can you share a snippet of your story of how you have overcome, navigated some of the challenges it is that you have experienced?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I've been listening to some of the stories so bravely sharing over the last few days. It's been absolutely heart-wrenching but wonderful to hear overcoming stories. And I think mine's still, I always keep saying, I still wonder if mine's just a little bit different though, because it does really highlight the fact of not necessarily one specific traumatic event, although I have had the odd couple of them, but more so kind of what the build-up of trauma does to you when it's repetitive over time, which just, it folds in really nicely with my with my work really, and what I've studied academically through all the years as well. So it's really nice to be able to not only now understand what I've learned, but also see it through my life and through my family, and put it into practice, you know, so it's really good. But I would say what my actual traumatic event is then is, I would say, is probably self-destruction. It's taking away your self-worth bit by bit until you feel pretty worthless. And then a whole life just seems a really big struggle. And sometimes we often blame ourselves, I think, and we say, well, you know, it's our fault, you know, things go wrong, or it's always me, or I always do this, or I'm clumsy. And I really did fall into that trap through like parentification, through generations as well, you know, ways that people parent, different structures, different ways. It all has massive effects on how we are. And so when I've actually hit troubling times, what's been going on in my life and what's in the background going on in my head has really affected how I can deal with events. And I think that's quite important to state as well, is that, again, we've heard so many stories of different traumatic events, some who talk about their own traumatic life events, child abuse to say, through to events what other people, how that's affected them, like through other people's post-traumatic stress. You know, so I do find that quite interesting, and my dyslexia has just took me off there because I wondered where I was going with that. But there we go.
It'll come.
Yeah, it will come back. Yeah, so I mean, so putting my story together has been, it started bit by bit because I started talking like off the scenes at some different various women group talks and things, and as it's gradually come out and as I've started digging into things, I've really realised how important it is to actually make the links early on, which is what I was going back to saying, how having those repetitive things happen throughout childhood can have a big effect on you. We know them as ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. But I mean, if we talk about most traumatic things that have happened to me, would probably be the one that most people are interested in, is being an alcoholic, for basically abusing alcohol for 2 years until my body really didn't like alcohol. That's why it didn't happen for too long, and rejected it. And I ended up obviously having like a near-death experience, out-of-body experience, whatever you want. I don't know what it was, but it's weird. And to have to come back from that, and again have to face reality of guilt, you know, so going through that whole death process was really tough, and then getting over rebuilding your life, and kind of starting things again. So I'm going off key, and I'm focusing on the sort of main topic there of kind of a holistic picture, and I think maybe it might be the time now where I sort of kind of link it all together really and take you back. So when I was a child in school, I would definitely struggled more so than others. I didn't necessarily realise it so much so at the specific time, but it's sort of after you go through primary school, you start to realise that you probably are struggling more so than others. I found things like tests incredibly difficult, and a fear that came over me that wasn't just being a little bit nervous. It was stopping me in my tracks. It was not being able to think. Strange things that happened as a child, which I couldn't quite pinpoint. My family life as well as a child was quite chaotic. My family run businesses and quite large businesses, so we often had people in the house. Also, my family liked social life as well, so they were often out again, or we often had people at the house. So it was very busy, and I think, and I mentioned the reason that's important because it kind of sets the tone that actually my life was quite chaotic. Also, my parents had big families. I'm an only child, but my parents, had loads of brothers and sisters. So they literally, again, early years, we had lots of family around, and I would stay out with family a lot. So it was quite unpredictable, and I really struggled in school, which, again, you can say, well, that's most people's lives early on, which is absolutely fine. And it did seem like that, and that's what I generally did believe, until I became to an age where things start to recognise things, which is what we sort of say the age of about it's about 7 really. Sorry, I'm just switching my sound timer, so I'm kind of have a rough idea of how long I've got left otherwise.
Oh, awesome. I love that.
Yeah, so it's a bit wrong because we started late. Yeah, so when I got to about the age of 7 was when I started to be a bit more aware of things, a bit aware of my own skills, that I knew that I was really properly struggling in school, that I knew that I was a bit quirky in friendships, that I found it a bit difficult. I really overthought friendships a lot. I would often blurt out the wrong words, say the wrong. I still do it now. You know, I would be overtalk. Being fellow dyslexic, Wendy, you probably know what I'm talking about. You know, it comes straight out, or it's a wrong word, or you say you think you've said the right word, and sometimes I've said something that's actually really quite bad wrong word to say to somebody, you know, and so then you've got to retract it back, and then the guilt of saying the wrong thing. So in school, socially was just, it's a minefield. I was just always struggling. It was always stressful, and then the work was really hard as well. So there was no lightness in any of it. And then of course the fact that I had to get out of bed, walk to school, go to school, be somewhere I wasn't really enjoying, so it was all just a little bit tough. And then you would think, if you come home, at least you can come home and enjoy home life. But I would come home and it was full of rows and, you know, really toxic atmosphere, which was building up quite bad as I kind of got in between the ages 7 and 10. So I was now experiencing, because if there's family issues going on between your parents and there's abuse between the parents, then if your child is part of that, then to an extent they're going through that abuse as well themselves. You know, you're sharing that as a family. So that was kind of the early onslaughts then of seeing what was going on. Also, that was the early onslaughts. I talk a lot of generational trauma through my stories, and that was kind of where I started to see as well. I can look back now and I can start to see that's where we sort of set the tone of what our acceptance levels are in a relationship. So what I was seeing at the age of 7, I thought that was acceptable, that parents come and go at different times, they go out partying all the time, they come back, they row, they fight like cat and dog, and then we get on with it and move on. You know, so that was what my expectation was for a relationship at 7 years old. When we think about Disney princesses and stuff, that's not what we're watching on telly, but that's what I had subconsciously told myself I was worthy of and I was going to have. And I did, as you read my stories and you realise what I've done. So that was kind of leading us up into the sort of teenage years. And in my story, then I sort of then take you through that generation as I'm going through. And then the next step I talk you through is obviously my teenage years. Now, in my teenage years, just before I got into secondary school, was when my parents split up. And I would class that as a full-on traumatic event for me, because it was a surprise. I had absolutely no idea. How it all came out was really quite shocking for a 10-year-old to find out. I can remember running home from school, and I can remember seeing that the house had all changed and all my stuff was in the family house, and then finding out what was going to be happening. Now, what was going to be happening was me moving across to the other side of town, which doesn't seem too bad. We're only talking 5 miles, not even that. When we were talking back in, what were we back then? We were back in the 80s, I think. So we didn't have social media, so I couldn't just move across town and jump on Facebook and chat to my mates. Telephones, we didn't have them in our pockets or anything. They were attached to lines against the wall that, you used to call and be told to get off if you were on for too long. So keeping in touch with your friends was pretty tough back then. So moving schools and moving right across town to a different catchment area was challenging. It was a bit scary. I've done it though, because I'm quirky, I'm me, I'll talk to anyone. And also my mum did actually manage to make some good links with my godmother to some friends in that area, which really helped, because that kind of helped my teenage years in friendship, really. But talking about friendships in teenage years, I mean, I had loads of friends. I still have, but I think it's because I am quite open. I'm very honest and open, and people know where they stand with me. And I think it's always had it's a good way to be able to open up and make friends. So I think having friends has been quite easy, although I was very clever at screwing them up as well. Again, saying the wrong thing or doing things slightly out of place. Also, my focus would change quite a lot. So if I was interested in one thing and that friend wasn't, then maybe that friend didn't fit the purpose for that job and stuff. And it's funny how your brains kind of work when you've got neurodiversities going on. But again, you know, and many people can say they face those same old issues in school, which is fine. So I have the social issues. But then again, if you add on to the education now is a lot harder. I was obviously struggling. And now I'd learned this new technique of a little bit of cheek and a little bit of joking gets me out of stuff. So I ended up being not necessarily the class clown, but I was always caught talking. Normally I saying, what did she say? What have we got to do? Because I didn't hear it. So I was always caught the one talking, you know, and also just distracting because I couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes. I want to jump up and around, do stuff and move about, any excuse to leave the room. So or toilet breaks and things. So, but the teachers, like I said, deemed that to be rather cheeky. And I actually ended up being educated outside classrooms. I think they still do it quite a lot now. I've seen it around where you sit outside the classroom on the desk. I was in there, or if that desk was busy, then quite often we had cupboards in our schools back then where they used to store all the books, and you'd have a little chair stuck in the bottom shelf and surrounded by books, and I'd do all the work in there. And you'd read all the notes that have been left by fellow students that have been shoved in there and tag. And
doesn't seem quite right, does it? That doesn't. That's making me feel slightly uncomfortable.
Yeah, but do you know what? At the time, and even looking back at it now, it doesn't seem wrong in any way. It was just sort of the way things were. And I mean, it gets worse when I start talking about my exam time, when I talk about my education at the end, because I mean I was failing so bad. And then of course I had another awful traumatic event where I lost a dear friend on the road. She was hit by a car on the way home from a nightclub one evening, which we had all been to, and she was an incredibly popular and beautiful member of not just, well, she wasn't even a member of our community, she was a member of another community, but I'd managed to meet her through our netball team. And we had made a brilliant friendship, and she had ended up coming over to St Austell and mixed with all of my friends, and we ended up mixing really well, and everybody kind of got on. And then, as I say, when she left, it was a massive shock to a lot of people. And I think especially at 14, and when you lose anyone at the age of 14, it just doesn't make sense, does it, to everybody? And I think we all struggled. But I kind of took it, I think, particularly hard because I felt that she was so perfect. She should never have gone. Whereas there was me, a complete waste of space, really, is how I see myself back then, making mistake after mistake, not wanted by anyone, parents or whatever. And why did she go? And I felt really guilty from that. And also I felt really guilty because at the time I didn't realise, but we were just 100 yards, not even 100 yards, in front of where it happened, further up the road. And we discussed going back, but we I mean, at the time with the friends we were with, we didn't think that the outcome was anything like it was. We thought that we would probably know who or what had gone on, or something had happened. Maybe, I don't know, thought maybe somebody had hit a car or something, or fallen over, or I don't know, nothing as serious or to the extent. I mean, certainly, although you think you might know them, you didn't think that it was going to be from your friendship circle. So again, when you get that shock in the morning, that phone call first thing in the morning as you're waking up to be told, oh my God, that I knew who I could have been there, and it was a really hard process. And at 14, I just couldn't cope with that struggles on top of everything else that was going on, family life and school and everything. It was kind of like the final bit, the final push. And I ended up in hospital with psychiatric help. And I talk about the importance of that in the book is the fact that actually my psychiatrist who was looking after me that day was actually the godmother of the dear friend that I'd lost on the road traffic accident. So yeah, it was a very powerful message, that particular chat and realization moment. But from that, going back to what we're talking about, the education, well, of course, I screwed up all of my exams. I ended up being homeschooled. We say homeschooled. I laugh at that because Homeschooling now is quite different. Homeschooling then was me lying on my bed, doing basically textbooks, homework. That's how I done my whole last year of school and learned everything for my exams. Was sat at home just going through textbook. So of course the desire to learn was minimal. So you don't want to learn because how boring is that? And so you just end up failing more. So needless to say, I left school without any GCSEs. I think I scraped with a couple, but nothing like what was expected, and nothing that was going to get me anywhere I wanted to go. But I had a lucky break, really. I had a really good careers advisor at the time who put me in contact when they were starting, I don't know which countries have them, but the modern apprentices, YTS, back in the day when they were starting.
I remember.
Yeah. I was one of the first people to trial them, and
they're good. They were good because it was all hands-on. It was, learn as you're doing. It wasn't academic. It was all, you're on the job, you're doing it, you're learning while you're doing it. It was no academic stuff. It was great.
Oh, you've just got a bit crackly, so I'm just having a bit of a play. Here we go.
Fabulous.
Okay.
I'm sounding like a Dalek.
I know you went ever so crackly, so I've just kind of adjusted something a minute. So hopefully it just means that I'm going to be holding my phone, so it might be wobbly for the next 10 minutes or so. But so I mean, like I said, so I got the lucky break then, and I got into travel. And this is when it was quite important, because I started to realise, actually, when I found something I enjoyed, I was really good at it. And it took until then for me to work this out. So I went into travel and I'd done really good. Don't get me wrong, I had an amazing boss and an amazing team. But they literally, I was able to win holidays. I was getting top sales, like top trainees and stuff all the time, doing really well. So of course, when you're getting lots of reward and lots of praise, you want to do more, don't you? And you really enjoy it. But the thing is, with me, when life is going really, really good, I like to add to it. I like to make it harder. so I kind of, I hint on that as in my story. So then I thought, okay, time to fall in love, really, isn't it? Find a bloke. Well, the bloke found me, and settle down, have children. Buy a house. Oh, let's buy a bigger house. Let's make sure it's a renovation, so it's really hard work. Oh, I know. Why don't you expand the businesses too? Yeah, let's go, and throw on all the extra pressure. And needless to say, for we were young married love back then, fairly young to get married. I was more so. He was slightly older than me, but we struggled. We were both struggling with our egos. We didn't have the support you have now, for goodness sake. Quite often you kept it to yourself. You didn't admit to people that you were struggling back then, really, because you were seen a failure. In fact, we used to joke about watching people on the telly, the Americans, going and getting counselling and lying on couches. I mean, oh my goodness, how bizarre is that? Who do they think
Very
they
un-English.
Yeah, that's what we used to say. Now I'm doing it. Now I'm the one who's but yeah, so it's quite funny. But yeah, so back then with my first marriage, we didn't it was too much struggles, and also we were both very fiery people. We both thought we were right, both very similar. So it was an ego battle, and I talk about how I struggled in that relationship anyway, more so about how you internalize your feelings, you don't want to talk to people, that affects your emotions, you can't focus properly, you start making mistakes. There's lots of things in the environment. If your environment isn't good, it will really affect on you and how you are behaving and how you are managing your emotions. So my environment had gone from being really good to now being really bad. And I really, really, really love my children. I've always loved children, hence why I work with them now. And my marriage got to a point where I was starting to see like toxic patterns that I'd seen with my parents, like quite horrific rows, things that, again, I did not want. my children to witness things that I knew that I had witnessed, or I just seen the path. The path was there, we were on it, and I didn't want to go further down it. So I decided to leave. We had tried, you know, we'd tried to fix it a couple of times, but in the end I just had to, no, I've got to go. And I did, which again seemed okay at the time, I thought. You had struggles, don't get me wrong. Becoming a single parent when life's been very good, and you've been very fortunate, was a big wake-up call. Another wake-up call I'm having to face now, but it kind of, I think again it got me a bit stronger, and I learned lots of lessons. And during that time was when I thought, okay, now's the time, we'll start. I think I was working from home. I didn't want to go back to work in shops anymore because I had the children. So I started a teletext holiday. I would sell skiing holidays in the winter, and I forgot what we did in the summer. I've forgotten Canaries, I think, in the summer. Italy as well was one of my favourites. So we had the teletext pages going, which was doing well back in the day. Yes, that's when computers first came out in the home. But because I was working from home, I was able to go out with friends more, go out socialising. So we became a bit of a lady that lunched. And then that's when the drinking at lunchtime started. And then the evening bottle of wine or something that we might have, or a couple of lagers, turned into lunchtime drinks as well, which then turned into, I want to drink kind of all the time, because I realised that drinking helped me cope. I was able to mask everything for drinking. I was happy. I could manage things. Everything just seemed fine. You know, I could get on with life. What I didn't realise was I was drinking more throughout the day. The timings were changing, and it got to a point where I was drinking because I had to. I wasn't drinking for the feeling. I was drinking because I would have detoxes if I wasn't. And it was through those detoxes where cold turkey, where my body would shake, where I physically couldn't stand up straight because I would be in pain. You can't think, your head's just like a blur, and you just cry. You generally can't function. It's a horrid illness. So you end up drinking like a bit like paracetamol, is how I've always explained it. So when you've got a headache, you take a paracetamol. When the headache, feel the headache coming back, so you pop another paracetamol. Exactly the same with alcohol. That was how it was. So it wasn't like a necessarily another bottle of wine and another. It was just like a glass of wine or a vodka. But it ended up, the amount that I drank was a huge amount, and the stories have been published already on that online, which can be accessed. But I ended up in hospital. I collapsed. My body didn't like alcohol. I collapsed quicker than more so. And as I said, that's when I ended up in hospital with liver disease. I had blocked pseudocysts. I had pancreatitis. My main arteries were blocked. I literally, family were coming to, and friends were coming to say goodbye. But I managed to get out after a month of struggles and in and out of consciousness, and as I said, the out of body experience or lucid dreams, whatever, however you want to explain them. That's when in hospital it started to, when you become sober, is basically when I left. As you go through hospital and you feel all the feelings, and you start to become sober at the end, and then you start to think about your life and how it's got to change. And I realized when I came out, I had to change my life drastically again. I had to restart and repaint a whole new picture, because I couldn't go back to the same job because I was at home. I'd have the freedom to drink still, and I was isolated, so that wasn't no good. And also my friends were drinking friends, so I had to get new friends. So there's lots of changes. But I think that by sitting down and reflecting over life and working out how I got to that point and why I was struggling was the catalyst. Actually taking ownership. Stop blaming other people. Stop blaming situations. Actually saying, well, classic thing I always say, there's no point worrying about anything. Worrying is like a rocking chair. It gets you nowhere. You know, if you're going to think about something, worry about something, come up with a plan, come up with a solution. And that's kind of what I did. So when I came out of hospital, rewrote my life, decided what I wanted to be, decided how I was going to get there, decided who was going to be in my life, how I was going to do it. And that's what I started to do. And I did. And I went into a career in education, which is where I kind of still am now. But I think my story, it goes on throughout life, and it goes on for too long to go on any further. So I don't know if that's where you kind of want to leave it there, Wendy, or if you want to pick in further.
I think what's really interesting is because I know more about your story, and people can read a lot more about the story in the book. I think what's really interesting is the layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. But also throughout the process, I know that you've been misdiagnosed and mistreated. Misdiagnosed,
yeah,
is what I mean, not mistreated. And,
the medication.
The impact that has on you growing up was really significant.
Yeah, definitely.
So that didn't help.
It didn't. And I think it goes back to what I was saying about education. Had I have known that my brain was wired differently, which I didn't actually find out until I went into adult education. So when I actually went back to school to study for myself was when it was highlighted straight away. Dyslexia was bang, straight away. And then next round of education, ADHD, and then nothing, this all still isn't working quite right. Yes, okay, yeah, that is the autism as well. So that's kind of where we're sat. But before I got to that, and that is literally only in the last 5 years or so, before that, and also it's the menopause that I think kicked that off, because we struggle, neurodiverse people struggle more so with menopause, and or can do, and that was when it really started to all really raise its head. But yeah, so I mean, the struggles of school, had I have known that my brain was different and I had a different learning style, and if I was interested in the lessons, I always used to say that, but it's funny, I always done really well in art and RE because I enjoyed them. And I still do. I love history, religion, all that sort of stuff. So, and it's funny, they were the ones I'd done better in. And it's because I was more interested. And had I have known that as a child, I wouldn't have been so tough on myself, because I'd done some pretty horrific things to myself over the years, plenty of self-harm, including other, and literally, I would never have done any of that. I would have been a lot more sympathetic to myself, like I am now. I still struggle. I get emotional now. I can still wake up and want to hit myself and slap myself in the mornings and tell myself off, but I get over it a lot quicker now, because I'm like, come on, it's it's not, there's a reason now. But the misdiagnosis came through, and this is what I would like to get this point across. It's important, if you feel that you struggled in life, more so maybe than others, or you're like, why is my life always so hard? Why can't anything ever be easy? Why is this? Why, maybe it could be something else, and it might be worth exploring. Start having a look, start finding out about your family. Has anyone in your family ever struggled with mental health? Has anybody ever had any quirkinesses or unique ways? Start to find out about your family, what's been going on, and if you can't, just research yourself, do a timeline, work out the key things that happened to you. What were the triggers? What upset you? Was it the environment? Was it not being able to handle your emotions? Because if it's those things, chances are it is something else, and you can get help for that. Because being told you've got anxiety and taking anxiety pills that do absolutely nothing for you other than make you dependent on them is not good. Because it's that over a period of time you're taking things to stop you. Addiction, it should have been highlighted with my addiction gene many a times, because again, that's another common link. The addiction, not coping with menopause or periods in general. There's a condition linked with neurodiversity where women can struggle more so. So there's lots of areas, and I think it's important, if anybody ever feels there's no harm in exploring it. There's nothing wrong with being. I don't think we are neurodiverse. I think there's a small amount of neurotypical brains out there. I think the majority of us are wired differently because of life. Trauma affects our brain. the more impacts we have, bang after bang after bang, like a boxer, for goodness sake. There's only so much you can take until it will affect your brain. And that is what's important. So you've got to look after yourself. Learn to look after yourself, because there is only so much you'll be able to take.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back now, after everything that you know, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, I really struggled when I seen that question. Do you know what? I think it's a bit of a weird one, and I think it would be just write down your goals when you're young. Write down what you want to be. Write a story. Write a journal. Just write down your dreams, your desires. And I don't mean I want to be a billionaire and I want to live in the Bahamas. I don't mean that sort of thing. I mean, just like, again, where would you want to live? What type of house? How many kids? What animals if you don't kill? Whatever. And then just kind of go back to it as you go through the years, and especially because when you're in dark times, then you think that I've got nothing to live for. What do I even like? Because I've sat here and I've had to think, who am I? Who actually am I? I've been molded by so many different people over the years. I forgot who I was because I've been trying to please other people for so long. So it's being able to look back on things that I've written by my younger self and remember, like I said, I keep mentioning the timeline, going back to events and reliving them. I've actually realised who I am, and I think it's important to remember to have something to look back on. So I would say, journal through life, write down your dreams and your desires, and update them. Keep a journal to cheer up in your dark days. And that toolbox I talk about, make sure you're pre-armed with my toolbox. So
in the book.
It's going to make you feel better.
Get a signed copy of the book. Yes.
There you go. Rounded off with a nice little check.
I think what you've said is actually really important and not to be underestimated, because the amount of people we work with, when we say, what is it that you really want? A question that I used to ask people was, what do you want the business to give you? And they would look at me like sideways and they wouldn't be able to answer the question.
Because they're not that positive mind space. They're looking for help then. So they can't, they've forgotten their dream and what it was that they were building.
A complete disconnect. So if you make it habit writing, being clear, then you always have a direction, which I think is great. You've got a compass, you've got a direction, you're heading in, which I think is really, really helpful.
Yeah, it does. And especially we know that it's been coming out of trauma. It's the first thing we do, isn't it? Is look to plan. Okay, so how are we going to take? What's the first step? Any step. Even if it's have a shower. Just, how are we planning? How are we going to get through it?
Cup of tea, have a wash, the basics.
Absolutely. I think making the bed in the morning, that is a big thing. I learned that on some network marketing thing I went to over the years. Making the bed in the morning, just literally pushing the right mindset. So you get up, you've made the bed, you can't go back to it. Part of my secret is, as I've already told you, I was conditioned, obviously, as a child to do my work on my bed in my bedroom. I still do work on my bed with it all sprawled out so I can see everything. So, it's quite funny.
Lisa, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story with us and giving us that insight into a peek of your early years.
Well, thank you. It's very snippet on what you can say and how much to go into. I just hope when somebody watches back they get something out of it, or like I say, if they're interested, then either get in touch with ourselves, and we've got the book out where I go into a lot more detail on the story. Or get in contact. Thank you as well, Wendy. It's been fantastic this week.
It's definitely been an eye opener, hasn't it?
Absolutely. You will sleep well this evening.
I will. See you, Lisa. Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.